Perfect. Welcome everybody. Everything seems good to go live, so let's just do that, shall we? Now, first of all, we've had some questions come in, but don't be afraid to ask questions via the chat. I'd love to talk to you guys. We'll look at those questions as well as a few random threads that I wanted to go through. Gonna start off with this here. This is the 2022 Unit 42 Incident Response Report. And I'd like to focus on what they found that attackers are going for in 2022. What information are they after, or what data are they going for? So attackers' financial motives drive heavy use of ransomware and business email compromise, which is already an interesting headline to start off with. We'll start with some of the incident types. Ransomware and BEC were top attacks. The top attacks we responded to over the past 12 months, accounting for approximately 70% of the incident response cases. While these two attacks are the primary ways threat actors can monetize illicit access to networks, attackers have and use additional strategies for financial gain. I'm really tired in case you didn't notice yet. Threat actors have increasingly paired extortion with encryption, sometimes including added threats of informing customers or the press, or conducting or distributed denial of service attack. Some attackers focus on extortion alone. For example, 4% of our cases involved extortion without encryption, a technique distinct from ransomware that can be simpler to execute. In these cases, attackers coerce organizations into paying by threatening the release of customer data. So it's still customer data that seems to be a big driving force, even in 2022. Hey, how are you doing, Genius Scale? How is everybody doing, by the way? The incident responders and threat intelligence analysts note that extortion without encryption is likely to rise. The efficacy of extortion tactics has even led some prominent threat actors associated with the Conti ransomware group to publicly state that they envision focusing their future efforts on attacking organizations through extortion alone. So as you can see, extortion can be quite a bad thing. This is why it's super important that we as even pen testers make sure that no matter, even if the people that work for us have signed NDAs, all of the data should be protected properly. Everything should be encrypted properly, even when we send it on over the line. Stuff like that is super important. Yes, definitely. I can link that PDF. Ooh. It's going to be a little bit difficult, but I will link it in the through here. I can do that via my other computer. This is the link from the, let's see, Palo Alto 2022 report. There we go, and then I can link that in the chat for you guys. Now you will have to register, or at least leave your company data there. That's why I have downloaded it for you guys so far, and I'm reading some parts of it. Of course, I'm not gonna read everything from there, but it might be prudent if I zoom in. And it would, of course, if you're interested, feel free to have a look at that. Now, as you can see, ransomware makes up about 36%. Sorry about that bump, by the way. Then we have business email compromise, or the BEC attacks that we were talking about, making up 34%, whereas network intrusions only make up about 14% of attacks these days. That's really surprising to me. Insider threat is still a big part of it. That's no big surprise. And then we have the extortion, which seems to be growing over the years. That's a worrying trend. Attackers are looking for an easy way in. Suspected means of initial access. So the top 3 access vectors for threat actors were phishing, exploitation of known software vulnerabilities, and brute force credentials attacks. That's even scarier as well, because like phishing, it's insane how prominent phishing has become, especially since like with a well-placed phishing attack, if there are no proper defenses in place, you're gonna have a big problem because those can hit management, upper management, and then you're directly into some very high executive email boxes. Now, of course, exploitation of known software still remains a big problem. That's something that I've learned when I went through my OSCP, that exploitation of known software is a big issue and will be for a long time coming. But of course, misconfigurations and stuff like that are also a big issue there. Now, brute forcing of credentials, how the best way to attack or protect against this would be, of course, not to allow any brute forcing for that kind of stuff. But then how do you implement that properly? Because if you have like a big, especially with IPv6 networks, you're gonna have to defend against that properly. Let's see, what else did you write? Focused primarily on remote desktop protocol. These three attack factors total over 77% of the suspected root causes for intrusion. Of note, the next most commonly used means of access for threat vectors was leveraging previously compromised credentials. That's funny because I think I have it open still here, and that's kind of what led me to this article, or at least this report. Latest critical Atlassian Confluence vulnerability under active exploitation. And I think a second article there was CISA warns of Atlassian Confluence hard-coded credential bug exploited in attack. So hard-coded credentials, definitely not a good idea, not in a Confluence, not in a repository. There are key solutions for that, and we should always use those key storing solutions if possible. Even if not possible, we should never just store our passwords in repositories or things like wikis or anything remotely sensitive, even like customer data. I've seen this as well before, where in ticketing systems like in Jira, they would just paste customer data, and even though that one record might not seem like a big problem, if somebody is able to compromise your problem with GDPR in Europe, that might still become a big problem. Hey Shronen, great to have you here, my friend. Just a little bit of an intermezzo there. So as we can see, phishing has been a great at 37% of the initial access vectors. Then we have software vulnerabilities at 31%, the brute forcing followed by 9%, and then those previously compromised credentials. That's a big one. That's also why it's so important to change your password every now and again, by the way, in case it was ever compromised, and it might not even seem like it was. That's the biggest problem, because those things often remain invisible. Insider threat is still an issue there. Sorry about my coffee machine, who decided it wanted some attention as well. Social engineering, of course, abuse of trusted relationships and tools. And that's also a thing where they can not only go after your company itself, but also after a company that you work with, somebody in your supply chain, third-party software supplier, and they can implement their attacks that way. Big scary attacks going on. A few key vulnerabilities have become attackers' favorites apparently. So we have proxy shell with a couple of CVEs attached to it coming in, log4j or log4shell. Wow, that has clung quickly. I still remember that coming out and being a huge issue for things like Minecraft servers even. Seeing it as being one of the top attack factors now. Still proxy shell at 55% with an overwhelming amount of the cases. Wow. Then we have Sonic Wall CVEs, the proxy logon, and Zoho Manage Engine AD Self-Service Plus CVEs, followed by Fortinet CVEs, and of course the other vulnerabilities. That's strange, by the way, because Fortinet CVEs, you'd expect them to be patched often enough, since they are things like firewalls, for example. but it seems like still those CVEs might exist, but they aren't patched properly. Okay, then we have Log4Shell, a little bit of an article about that. If you're interested about that, there's more about that on YouTube. I'm sure about that also on my channel, by the way. Attackers follow the money when targeting industries. So let's see about the industries that are affected. The top industries were finance, professional and legal services. Big surprise there. Manufacturing, healthcare, high-tech and wholesale and retail. These industries accounted for 60% and more of the cases. Organizations within these industries store, transmit and process high volumes of monetizable sensitive information that attracts threat actors. Yeah, especially in the legal services. Imagine being able to blackmail like a legal company by releasing their company data internally. Jesus. Let's see if you have any questions, by the way, don't hesitate to ask. I'd be happy to talk to you guys. Hey, how's it going, Mr. Samaritan? Good to have you here as well. Attackers may at times purposely target certain industries, for example financial organizations, because they frequently conduct wire transfers, or healthcare organizations because they may be particularly motivated to avoid operational disruptions. However, many attackers are opportunistic, simply scanning the internet in search of systems where they might leverage specific vulnerabilities. In some cases, industries may have been particularly affected, not because attackers intended to target them, but because, for example, organizations in those industries happen to make widespread use of certain software with known vulnerabilities. So we have finance accounting for a really high amount of reports there, with professional and legal services not following far behind. And we can even see education on that list, which is really worrying as well, because we've been seeing a really big rise in education, as everybody can start a simple course right now, and if those things are getting targeted, well, you know how secure people at their own homes are, so let's hope that they don't download all of their customer data, shall we? But not all motivations are financial. Grudges matter too. Insider threats were not the most common type of incident we handled, but they can be significant because they involve a malicious actor who knows exactly where to look to find sensitive data. 75% of our insider threat cases pertained to a disgruntled ex-employee who left with company data, destroyed company data, or accessed company networks after their departure. How often do we have to tell you to, as a company owner, disable account access after somebody leaves? This is such a hard concept to grasp. I am still in some of these chat servers of some of the companies that I used to work at, and I even still have access to a YouTube channel of a particular company I used to work with. That is really discouraging for me, because they are big companies and they should have these things nailed down. Seeing it not be like that really disgrunts me as well. So they say as well, however, our consultants note that many attacks that appear initially to be insider threats turn out to come from cyber criminals who, for instance, purchased stolen credentials. With mature markets for illicit initial access available, differentiating between legitimate user access and malicious user access is becoming more challenging. That's also something that they're gonna have to take into account. That's something that I didn't even think about myself, but yes, really great insights here. Now I'm gonna leave the rest of this PDF to you guys if you'd like to read it. I'll pin the certain message where I give that link, so if you guys are interested in it, great read. Definitely would recommend it if you are bored on the toilet and have nothing to read. Print this out so you'll always have something to do. Let's see, do we have anything else? Oh yeah, definitely. And the thing with healthcare as well is that it often has outdated network architecture, has outdated software running, and not all healthcare. I don't say that it's everywhere, but I'm also not saying that the security practices have been ingrained in our culture as they should be, especially not within healthcare. So I totally agree that we should, if we can, put more into getting our healthcare up to par when it comes to that. There's just too much at stake over there. Now, this next thing I'd like to go over is a Twitter thread by a guy named Rohit. He's really good at bug bounties. I've been following him for a little bit, and he seems to get bug bounties on a pretty consistent basis. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to his Twitter account in the chat in a moment as well. He says, in my initial days, he spent a lot of time writing custom tools, setting verb configs for each target, perfecting things, and a lot of useless stuff while doing bug bounties. Sometimes we overcomplicate small things. So he's had a bit of a conversation, which we'll look later into as well. And he says that he stopped writing any automation script. I guess writing these scripts is like a fantasy which affects us all in the early days, and I can't agree with that more. When I first got started, I was dreaming of automating, finding all of these vulnerabilities all over the web. Of course, that turned out different. Everything is already available, and writing same sort of stuff over and over again in the name of automation is just a waste of time. It definitely is. Of course, you can practice your bash skills or whatever, but it's still you're only gonna get so far with writing tools that somebody else has written anyway before you. Especially if you're just able to use those tools, just use them. We need to be more flexible. Now I focus more on hunting and writing exploits specific scripts only. He saw dog gig hunting just with Aquatone, and if you're still an automation fan, stop wasting time writing the same thing over and over. Recon for the win works like a charm. It definitely does. The moral of the story is do not complicate things, be more flexible and open-minded, utilize the available resources instead of writing them from scratch, spending more time on the browser instead of the terminal, and those were just a few mistakes. And that is something that, of course, I've been teaching from the beginning as well, is that I don't really like automation. It's not that I don't like automating things that are well known, but it's also the fact that automation just misses a lot of things. We can't prepare automation for everything. Just think about business logic, for example. Good luck teaching a computer logic. That's not gonna happen in the next couple of years. And even if it is, it's gonna be rudimentary logic, let alone the more advanced stuff. That's something that I've always tried to bring people's attention to, that even broken access control and IDORs is you can train a computer to look for exactly the rules that you set and that need to be set. But if there's one thing that's a little bit divergent, then the computer can't really test for that, and you'll have to look into that yourself. Um, let's see, do we have any more questions? That's why I've got my OSCP. Oh yeah, definitely. I've got my OSCP to help protect as well to a degree, but it's hard to get into these places like hospitals, for example, even. The thing is, they often don't wanna or don't have the budget to spend on that kind of stuff. You see them building new hospital wings every now and again, and that's really, really required for the healthcare of the patient. And I agree that cybersecurity is also very, very important. But if they can pick between buying another life-saving machine or getting pen tested for a few months, I think the choice is easy to make. And it's just hard, it's a catch-22. Because in a way, the government should be able to provide for us there better. but I might be just conspiracy thinking a little bit too hard there. I just think it's super important because, of course, then somebody needs to pay that as well. I'm not stupid either. I know that money has to come from somewhere. But I just think that when we do all of this, cybersecurity is important. The moment we start using smart devices like smart heartbeat monitors and smart, like, have you seen a hospital lately? It's fucking full of computers. Unbelievable. It's not that it's a super, super bad thing because they help us as well. Computers make the world a smarter place. It's just that do they really all have to be connected to an Ethernet cable and connected to a network? Uh, that's just sometimes a bit iffy. Even if we like, there's this pen testing methodology called OSSTMM, and it's all about decreasing your attack surface by decreasing what's available to the outside network, and then you, like, if you only have one gate to protect, you can put all your guards on that specific gate. So the more you can close up, the better, of course. I think that's a model that we have to work upon. We'll see what the future brings. I think it will be interesting as we can see more nation states developing that are attacking each other through cybersecurity warfare. Who knows, maybe even hospitals might be a place of attack and interest in the future. I might be, again, a little bit going too far there. I bet he got to this level by doing that first, though. I feel like the things I learned the best are ones I wrote script for, even if they were simple. To a degree, yeah, I agree. But things like what I wanted to do in the beginning was you had things like XSS Strike or XSS Hunter. Don't remember the name. I think it was XSS Strike, SQL Map. You had subdomain enumeration. I wanted to just create a script to chain it all, because I had this wild fantasy that I could easily do that, but well, didn't turn out that way, to be honest. First of all, it's really hard to automate something like this because there are just too many scenarios that can pop up. But second of all, of course, as well, you need to think, do I really want to spend time there? Or do I really want to spend time going through all of this manually and learning how to exploit it manually and then how to script the things later on? Because I can do, for example, I can look for, let's say, SQL injection manually and then learn how all of that works. And then learn that when I use SQL Map, I need to use SQL Map, but I also need to use it authenticated. And I can write my own SQL Map, but it's not going to be as effective as the one that's already existing. Then it's better to write some easier way to process the subdomains I already have, for example. Even though you already have HTTP probe again, but then it's still more rewarding in that case to write something small like that, because a bigger project requires exponentially bigger requirements as well. That's the biggest problem that I encountered. Whenever I wanted to write a small piece of software, I could easily do it, but whenever I wanted to increase its size or added features to it, then it immediately became a lot bigger already because every single feature needed to be updated with everything that had to be included. Anyway, just my opinion on scripting. But oh yeah, yeah, I'm not gonna comment too much about that situation with the whole bathroom and the PDFs. Yeah, exactly. Why the heck does it need to be Wi-Fi enabled, right? It's like, and even if it's not Wi-Fi enabled, like, disable everything that doesn't need to be on that system. For freak's sake. I just sometimes can't wrap my head around how easily people will hook something up to the internet. It's like digital voting. Who thinks digital voting is a good idea? At least in our world. Like, seriously, there's a problem if you think that digital voting can be something that we can pull off even slightly competently. We can't even pull off paper voting slightly competently, let alone digital voting. But yeah, we'll see how that turns out. Let's see, in a situation where a company gets attacked by ransomware, how do you free them from such an attack without having to pay ransomware and losing data? Sometimes there's decryptors available, not often, of course. And if there really is, well, once there's an encryption that has taken place, and there's not really much you can do. Once the data has been encrypted, you can try to decrypt it by creating like a backup copy and trying to keep going over brute forcing keys, for example. But chances you're going to find those keys are very slim. That's something that I've theorized. I might be wrong. I've never worked for a company like that. So if anybody has any experience with that, I'd love to hear your experiences on it. How you deal with having ransomware and removing it without having to pay up that specific thing that is connected. Now I'd like to talk about another tweet that has come by, a WordPress Dork, basically a dork that lets you view things like the etc root file, for example. That's gonna be dangerous. So of course, it's a dork. If you have WordPress enabled, check if this is something that you're having trouble with. If you are, it might be probably a good idea to make sure that this doesn't happen on your system. I'm not one to hide it. I'm not one to make claims that security through obscurity works really well. So that's why I'm not afraid to show a dork like this on stream either. If you abuse it, hey, you can't claim that the gun maker is responsible for the death of a person either. I'm not gonna say here's a loaded gun, go point it at that person. But I am saying, hey, here's the problem. Go check yourself if you have this problem. This is something very important. Now, what this is basically a symlink to a file. As you can see, it can contain links to the root etc password file. To the etc password file, I mean. That's just one file that can be found. Now, for the complete dork, you'll have to look on my Twitter. I reshared it. Or just go straight to the source, go to my friend's Twitter, but I'm not gonna link it here because of those dangers. I know it's right on screen anyway, but still you'll have to do a little bit of trouble, at least type it over. And I'd like to go to the Q&A section because I've had a few questions come in. One is from Mr. Deep. What's your ultimate dream, Uncle? What's 5 things you checklist daily in your life for making it better? My ultimate dream, honestly, is to own a theme park, and that might sound silly, but I freaking love theme parks. Just creating joy in people is something that I love to do. And that might sound cheesy, but hey, I'm a rat. What do you expect, right? Cheese is kind of my thing. And then 5 things in my daily checklist to improve my life is to whatever it takes less than 5 minutes. I always do it immediately. I write things down that I have to do later. I make sure that I study at least a little bit every day and that I improve, because trying to become the person I want to be also includes having to grow a certain amount on my own path. I have to find my own way, and I've kind of figured out the direction I want to go into. It changes every now and again, but it's something that I take super seriously in that regard. So chipping away at my dream is something that I'm working on every day. And let's be real, I'm kind of already living my dream life because I have my own company now and I'm ready for the future. Let's see another question. How is it fun to hack, and what if you're not getting enough hits? That's a great question. You have to make it fun to hack as well, to a degree. Now, I'm not gonna be the person who's gonna be like, uh, if it's not fun for you, it's because you're not making it fun for yourself, or you have to gamify waiting in line, you know. You have to see, you have to make it a game for yourself. Well, of course, to a degree as well, but hacking is all about doing the things that you like doing and that you enjoy doing. And to a degree, it's about misusing software, misusing things, using them in a way that they're not intended to be used. But that's totally up to you what that means for you. If that means that you're hacking a website, then that's definitely fun. But if you prefer networks, if you prefer IoT, if you prefer just unscrewing things to see how they work and trying to rewire them, trying lock picking, and just try and diversify yourself, especially in the beginning. If you still think you haven't found something that you really want to do yourself yet, then you still have that open mind. If you're later on in your career path and you're sort of locked yourself in to a niche within hacking, then it's really hard to switch that up. Of course, you can still do it as a hobby, but you already have 5 years of web app hacking experience behind you. Then going to networks and starting at the beginning is not going to be fun. It's going to be rather difficult. So especially in the beginning, diversify yourself and see what your options there are. That's something that I would definitely recommend. Don't know how I got to this, but alright. Um, Another thing is you definitely have to gamify it for yourself a little bit, but don't push yourself too hard on that either, because if you're not finding fun in it, you're just not finding fun in it. I do try to gamify in a sense that I try to challenge myself to learn a little bit every day, and if I do, I kind of reward myself for it as well. I've put the reward system to use where if I perform a difficult challenge or difficult task, then I am allowed to reward myself with something good. But I know that not everybody's gonna want to do that even. So, great questions, by the way. Don't know if there are more questions from the chat. Bro, if I can do oh, hey James, good having you here. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Let's see. Sonny asked, bro, if I can do rate limit on comment box, is it vulnerable? Not always, no. Usually rate limiting on things like login and password forgot functionalities, those are going to be more important. Because of course, you might be able to spam there, or it might seem like there are no rate limits in place, but after a little while, you might get banned from the website, or a WAF might kick in that's still banning you. So definitely be careful that you don't always take that into like a super impactful bug, because sometimes it's just not. It depends on the core functionality of your target in question. So be careful with that. But if you find something on login or on password forgot functionality, that's definitely a problem, of course. James says as well, attack multiple targets, pick a main target and report a couple bugs, and while you're waiting, hack your secondary website. Self-learn with all of the wonderful resources and apply them to your targets, then see how you like it. If you don't like it, pick different targets until you start to lose time when hacking. That's when you really found your focus, in my opinion. These are some great tips as well. That moment of you losing time, that's always a great point where you really want to be. But of course, the problem for me was that making my job into doing the things that I love doing, which was hacking, of course, also made me always lose time, which is not good, because sometimes it's good to look forward to the end of your day so you can go home and relax and play a video game or do what you like hacking. Uh, just a thing that I've noticed, nothing too particular, by the way. I don't know if there are any more questions, but for me, I'm really tired, so I think I'm gonna end the stream here. Thanks for watching, my friends. I love having you here, and if you guys want more streams like this in the future, don't be afraid to let me know. I would love to hear from what you prefer having. There's some new like emojis as well for people in the chat, so It doesn't really work apparently, but there should be a GIF. It's not a GIF, it's a fucking stupid JPEG, but oh well, I'll get over it. What are we gonna do about YouTube, right, my friends?